So thank you all for joining us for the Lunch and Learn. I'm going to introduce you all to Cherie Pierce. Cherie is one of our financial operations managers over in CNETs. She works for the Department of Entomology. She also used to be one of our financial analysts on the Dean's finance team. So Cherie has lots of experience, is well-versed in all kinds of crazy Excel things, and she's going to pass on some of her knowledge to all of us. So thank you, Cherie.
Thank you, Sarah. I actually was also the staff assembly professional development director for a little while too. So I have a soft spot when Sarah asked me to do this. So I am not the most prolific presenter in the world. I'm an analyst. I like to sit behind the scenes and, do my job. So please bear with me. And I'm more nervous than I thought I would be. So, and I don't know why. I have taught Excel to the college multiple times when I was in the dean's office. That was part of my role. One of the biggest things I realized when I did that is that the real life manipulation of data is the biggest hurdle to jump through. You take the classes and they do things like showing you graphs for M&M displacement. And you're like, that's great, but how do I get it to what I use? So what I'm going to use is some very, very old payroll data that has been scrambled. So that way y'all can't go look it up. And it's in the V1 Super Dope, right? So it should correlate enough to where you guys can follow along and understand without violating anybody's confidentiality. I'm going to drop that file in the chat. Let me make sure that I can drop it in here. So that way, if y'all wanted to follow along, you could. And then I can also ask for Sarah to post it when she posts it online. So I'll get started. I'm going to share my screen as we do this. I know that we have a limited time frame, so I may go kind of fast for all of you. I will try and get your questions. If something's not clear or I misspeak, because again, this isn't my bread and butter, chime in. I don't mind. I'll try and keep an eye on the chat notes as well, but it's a lot to do at one time. So bear with me as we get through this. Okay. So I have the data set here. For those of you who we're going to have a huge variety of Excel users in all of this. So I'm going to try and do some basic, like those that don't use Excel like at all. Hopefully you can get something out of it. So those of you that use Excel or are looking to it, I'm trying to do a gamut here. So this might be review for a lot of people and it might be well beyond other people, but hopefully you get something out of this. So the first thing that we always start off is some sort of data set, whether it's a data set that you create by hand typing things in, or in this case, I downloaded it from a resource with Looker. Now our data sets look different, but the concepts are all the same. So there's some few things that we always need to do whenever we get data. We need to prep it, and there's multiple ways to do that. There's the formatting options, like this is all a dollar amount. So if you click on it and hold on, I got to move my bar here because it's in my way. You can go up to the top here when you have a highlighted column and you can change that now to a number. If you wanted to change it, I mean, if you theoretically you change it to with a dollar sign in here, whatever you want. This one's also a number. So the formatting helps. I will tell you when I present data to people, some people get really mad if there's no commas. Other people get really mad if there's cents in it. So you got to get used to it. But these formattings will help you see things quickly. That's what Excel is supposed to do, is help you see the data as quickly as possible. So you format it to what works for your brain. Then as I look at this, I know kind of where I want to go. And I know that I'm going to end up displaying this with some sort of grouping. So I want the title code and the description together in one field. There are multiple ways to do this. I'm showing you the options that I use the most, and that's fastest for me. So I'm going to relabel my column here. I'm going to add a new column off to the side. And I'm going to use what we call as the concatenate formula. This is one that I didn't know existed until somebody showed me, and I use it all the time now. So with all formulas in Excel, you hit the equal sign first, and then you can start typing. And as you type, it will give you the options, what they think you have here. Concatenate is this one. I will tell you in the Microsoft Teams, it's actually a concat, not a concatenate. So there is a difference between Teams and Excel. So we use concatenate, and this is going to tell you what it wants. It wants the text for the first section. So you click on the cell that you want. You can click on the next cell if you want to just jam together. You hit a comma in between them. But I want a hyphen in between them. So I'm actually going to type a parenthesis and a hyphen. So that tells Excel you're going to put this first cell here, whatever's in it. Then you're going to type this hyphen, whatever's in between those quotations. I'm sorry, not parentheses, quotations. I want you to put that in there. And then the next element, I want that. And I close it off and I hit enter. You'll see it smash those two together with the hyphen in the middle. And then if I want to go all the way down, if you have, 200,000 lines, you don't want to drag this down. So you go this little X right here where my cursor changes from a 3D X or cross to a single D cross. You double click on it and it goes all the way down. The biggest tip I can tell you when you do things like this, when you are manipulating or changing the data set that you pulled, you want to flag it. You want to make it very visible that you added or changed it. So I always highlight the columns that I add. So you just do select the column, click the little highlight. You can make it any color you want, or yellow is available. The other thing I think I'll want to do when I put data together for whatever question I'm answering, I'm coming up with hypothetical questions in my brain here, is I'm going to want the total cost of these employees. So I have a salary amount and a benefits amount. I want to know the total cost. So once again, I label it, and I label as I go because I always forget to go back and do it. And I hit the equal sign, and I'm just going to hit this plus this. You could also do the sum equation. And then you hit the cell you want, and then a comma in between. You don't do the plus signs. There's 4,000 ways to do all of these things. I hit enter. I take it all the way down to the bottom. And now I have a total cost column. So that's how you would add columns, add some of the formulas in there, especially when you're working with data. I think this is an important thing to realize, that you can add things to the data, but you want to keep it separate. So that way people who are now looking at your stuff knows what's new and what they can't pull. Because I don't know how many times I was new and someone would give me something to recreate and update for the new year. I'm like, I can't find this field anywhere. And because they didn't highlight it or notate it as something that they added, I spent an hour looking for this field in the data sets. So try and make it useful for anybody who's going to come in after you. So now I have all of this, and the question is specifically, I want to know how much this one employee made for the year. Well, this data set only has employee ID numbers. It doesn't have names. I could go re-pull all the data. That's an option. Or I already have a worksheet here that has names and ID numbers together. So I can plug those in. So I can go up to the top here and I can right click and I can insert, and it'll add a new column to the left. Same idea for a row. If you highlight the row and you right click and you click insert, it'll do it on top. So left and top. If you screw it up, you hit Control Z and you do it, then you move it over and do it again. So I'm going to put in name, and we're going to do what's called a VLookup. This is my bread and butter. This is how I converge multiple data sets into one thing. I have the two tabs. I find the common denominator for them, in this case, the employee ID number, and I start mashing the data into one data set. I will tell you, I am using Excel 2016, so it only has the VLookup. If you use Excel 2020, or I think they might even have a 2022, they have an H or X lookup. I have not used those. The concept is the same. A VLOOKUP means a vertical lookup. So it means I'm going to take data in a vertical set. This is vertically listed, left to right. So if I take my equation and I hit VLOOKUP, I'm going to say, okay, Excel, and this is a conversation I have in my head every time I do this. I need you to look at this number right here, my comma, and I want you to go to this tab, and I want you to look at this data set. This whole thing. I select the whole thing, and I hit comma, and I want you to give me the second column. So you're going to take the number that I highlighted on that first worksheet. You're going to find it, and then you're going to give me the second one over. So I put comma 2. Oops, sorry, my thing moved. For some reason, my numbers don't work anymore. And then that's the true and false. So you always hit false or 0 will work. I type 0 because it's faster, it's less keystrokes. True means if it's a close enough match, it'll give you. I have never found a value for that or used for that in what we do. That might work someplace else. In the data that we present, it is always an exact match. If you can't find exactly what I need, I don't want to know about it. So I'll type it out correctly. And then you close out your parenthesis and you hit enter. And it went and it found that person's name based off of that number. Now, if I double click this as written, you'll see some NAs pop up. What happens is when you drag this down, you'll see this says C2, A2, and B307. If I copy it down and go to the next one, now it says C through A3. So it's moved the lookup down a row because that Excel thinks that it needs to go down. When you're doing a VLOOKUP, you don't want it to shift. So you're going to change it to what we call an absolute value. If you put the $ in front of the A, that means it's going to lock that column. If you put the $ in front of the 2, it's going to lock that row. So if it's okay to shift left and right, then you just lock the row. If it's okay to shift up and down, then you just lock the column. For VLOOKUPs, we lock them both. We lock everything. So you put absolute values in there. You can actually type the $ in there. Or you can, I hit F4. You just highlight the section, hit F4, and that puts it in there. You hit enter. And now when I copy it all the way down, now it's going to pull that up because it locked in my lookup into that grid and it didn't adjust it automatically. So Excel's super smart, but sometimes it's too smart for its own good. So you have to kind of hone it in a little bit. Let's see. I'm going to move the chat box over here. All right, so now that I think I have the data set, the data kind of figured out so I can put it into something that looks appropriate, I think I can probably move forward. However, I'm going to do some spot checking real quick. So I'm going to highlight the top row and I'm going to go to data and filter. And this way I can click on anything. And let's say I just want to look at Adam here and see what he did. And then I was, okay, I can see that he made $3,728.07 for the year. And if I wanted to look at all my GSRs, for example, I can do that. But as you can tell, then the data goes beyond the screen and it's not something that I can see quickly. So I got to find a way to sort this so I can find it quickly. The other thing I also want to be aware of is anybody who made a whole freak ton of money. So there's a way to do that at a quick glance. It's called conditional formatting. Conditional formatting is amazing and you can do 1,000 things with it. I'm just going to show you one or two of them so you get an idea of what it is. And then once you know, you either ask me or go to Google and see what conditional formatting can do with you. But if I click this column here and I go to my home page or home tab, there's a conditional formatting button. You click on it and I want to highlight cells greater than, I'm going to say $5,000. I want it light red filled with dark text. And you see it starting to do it. So now if I was auditing something and I needed to check on things that were more than $5,000, now I have a quick guide to show me what was over $5,000. if I wanted to say, well, I want to know who didn't get paid at all, I'm going to say, I want to say less than, I'm going to say $100 just for, fun. I'm going to change the way I can highlight it and click OK. And now you can see I can look at those quickly. So now you're not filtering, you're not leaving things out. You can see a picture. The conditional formatting is great. There's also an option for you to write your own equation, but they can get really complex. So I just want you to be aware that conditional formatting exists. So hopefully you can use it in the future. Debbie Brown asks, once you've applied conditional formatting to find cost greater than 5,000, can you sort that column to show those items? So you could, you can do the filter up here, and there's a filter by color. So you can look at just that, and that'll do it. You can also filter by a value if you didn't put the conditional formatting in there. So there is an option. If you put a filter in, you look at it and you're like, well, that's not helpful. You just go back and clear the filter and everything comes back on. So other ways to filter by color, which is useful, but you can only do it in the data set. So that can be problematic for some of the things that we do, just so you know. Okay, so now I'm like, okay, I think I know this, but there might be more to this picture than I need to know, or I haven't answered all my questions. So now we're going to put everything into a pivot table. So the first way to do that, first thing you do is you select everything. So I put my cursor at the top left corner, A1, I hit Control Shift, go all the way to the right, you hit down, and that's now selected everything quickly. And Sarah, you're gonna make me cackle, and then I'm gonna get in trouble because I was just watching that episode the other day. I've selected my whole data set. I'm gonna go up to the Insert tab, and there's an insert for pivot table right there. This is going to tell me what range I want. So if I need to change it or adjust it, this data was in a table, and I'll go into why that might be appropriate in a little bit. I could select the table. Usually it defaults to a new worksheet, which is typically what we end up doing. But if you wanted to put it like off to the left, you could change it to existing worksheet and then just select the cell that you want in there. I'll also say this, add this data to the data model will be used in very specific circumstances, and I can explain that in a few minutes as well. This is one thing that if you select the data model, the file becomes much more robust. It's a little bit bigger, so I don't select it unless I need to, and there's only one time that I've ever needed to use it, but it's something that comes around. So I'll explain that as well in a few minutes. And typically I hit the pivot table, the defaults are fine. I click OK, and now I've opened up a whole new tab with a pivot table. Pivot tables are my best friend because I can move data and I can tell stories and I can get an idea of things just by clicking and moving around. So a basic pivot table, and I'm going to say basic in like the best sense of the word here, especially when I'm doing payroll, is I put the employee's name in the row and you just drag and drop them. And if I don't like it, I can move it. And then I'm going to put the total cost. And now I have a sum of everybody in the total cost. And I'm going to click this real quick just because I hate when I don't see the commas. It drives me crazy. And I said, okay, well, I want their title code in here too, but I put them together for a reason because I want them both. I want both the title code and the description. So we'll add the field that we created in here. And that's fantastic. But my brain says, why is the total on the top? That's upside down. It drives me nuts. So anybody who works with pivot tables can usually get here and then they get stuck because the total's on the top and that's just wrong, period. So if you make sure your table is active and you know your table is active when it's in any cell within the table, you go up to your Analyze tab and Options, and this pop-up comes up. You go to the Display option and you click Classic Pivot Table Layout. Blink, click OK. And now the totals are on the bottom as they should be. And it's so much easier. And I have worked so hard to find a way to make that my default, and Excel will not let me do it. So I changed that. And I also now can select the total column by coming off to the left where my cursor changes to that little arrow. And that selects all of them. And I can change the color. So it makes it very, very clear. I can change the design to make it yellow, or what is that? Orange, pink. And now I can make it, I'm going to go green because, you know, why not? Oops, I only got the one. I will tell you this feature, this highlight all of them, I can't figure out in SharePoint or in Teams. I know there's a way to do it. I always use Excel in the desktop application because it's just so much more prolific. So now I can see things quickly and easily. And I could sort this if I wanted to see Adam again. I can't remember what was that, Adam. There he is. If I just wanted him, if I wanted to select him and his bestie, Alice here, I can put them together. Let's say somebody wants me to do it by period, then I just come in here and drop the period in the columns. I do this enough, I know what it should be. But let's say I put it in the wrong, like that may work for someone's brain. That's not working for my brain. So you can drag and drop them wherever you want. If it doesn't work, you just keep moving it. And if you don't like it, you just drop it back up to the top and it goes away. So pivot tables, you can keep moving around and it doesn't hurt anybody and nothing breaks. I'm going to take this out. Here's the thing though, is that some people want a dynamic pivot table and is not as well versed as you are in pivot tables. So we can put in what they call, what do they call them? Slicers. Slicers? Yes. Filters? I don't know. I'll figure it out. I'm going to add some more rows up top here, just so I have a little bit of space. And if I go up to the Analyze button, slicer, it's a slicer. I can't ever remember. You can click Insert Slicer. And I can decide which slicers I want. So in this case, I'm going to do a name and I'm going to do a title code description slicer. So now these two slicers have come up. And I can change their size so they fit up here. So I can give this to my dean. So she, or he now, I'm sorry, can move things around and filter it to their heart's chagrin without having to use those filter drop downs. This is just a different way to filter the data. It looks a little better when you're presenting it to other people. So now I can just select Adam. Oops, move over. And if I want to select multiples, I select that. And then I can come and select any person I want to. And just do that. If I'm done and I want to look at just title codes, I can select that as well. And when I'm done, I can filter it out. So the slicers are really nice when you're presenting it and giving it to other people because it provides them an opportunity to manipulate it and play with it themselves a little bit. Now, you can do things like instead of doing a sum here, you can click on the total or the value in your pivot table field and change the value to, let's say, an average. I want to know what his average salary was. And that will give me the average for that period. So I can also change these as well. This is when that data model comes in handy. There are so many times we do a unique count. Excel doesn't do unique counts easily. It does have a counting function, but it will include any blanks in this count function. So let's say I was counting people's names and someone got married and now their name is on there twice. They're going to count them as two people, but their ID number's on there once. But they might count the number of times the ID number shows up. So neither one of those will work. So if you do a pivot table, I'm going to insert here. I'm going to do it really quick where I add it to the data model. It takes a little bit longer to load because as I told you, it's a little bit more taxing on the system. I'm going to rebuild that pivot table really quick. I'm just going to do this one. Actually, I think I'm going to do it differently. I lied to you. Let's say I want to do a period and I want to know how many people in each period were paid. So I drop the ID down here and it says, well, that's a sum of employee IDs. That ain't going to be right, right? And I can do the count function. But now this is going to be duplicating names because it's going to count every time my employee ID showed up in period 1. And that might be 2 or 3 times in this case because it might be regular salary and vacation and sick. I could have a very prolific pay period. So instead I want to do a distinct count. This distinct count will only show up, it's down here at the bottom, when you do the data model. Click OK. And you can see that went from 748 to 241. So that little one, that little tweak, it's the only time I use it. I try not to use the data model. I know there are other options for the data model that I haven't gotten into, but that one I use enough that I felt that I should point it out. Sarah, the sum and the average. So if I wanted to do, let's say, the sum and the average of their payroll. So I'm gonna take the period out. I'm actually gonna remove my slicers here because they're getting in my way. Just highlight them and click delete. Oops. Just trying to make it so you can see things here. So if I have the total salary here, total cost, you can't put it in twice. So here's how I would do that. I would actually activate my pivot table, go to analyze, hit select, and select entire pivot table. You could highlight it too, but just make sure I don't miss anything. And I copy, Control C, paste, Control V, and then I would change this one to the average. Format that, and then I would just hide these cells. And then I would rename this. Oops, sorry, wrong field. And so that's how you can start smashing multiple pivot tables together to get data. There is some problems with that depending on what you're putting together, because maybe Aiden didn't have a line for the one that the field set that you're looking at, so it will shift everything up and over a little bit. So there are some limitations. This is why VLookups are great, because then I will do both these pivot tables together. I put a thing in here so you can see them as two separate ones. Oops, clear that out. And I can then create a summary tab where I put all the people's names, and then I do a VLOOKUP for their total, and then I do VLOOKUP for their summary, for their average. And you can always do the equation to remove if you can't find the name. So I can show you real quick. Let me remove the subtotals. If you right click on it, you get the subtotal name. I'm going to remove it just so I can get these names here. Oh my goodness. Oops, I'm just going to copy these to a new tab so I can show you how the VLOOKUP works. See, you put me on the spot and now I've forgotten what I'm doing. Here we go. I'm going to remove duplicates. You guys are getting the backdoor information here. So I'm highlighting my section. You got to remove duplicates. This has a header, so my data has headers. Just click OK. It's going to remove all the blank fields. That's one way to do it. The blank should show up at the bottom. And now I have just the data set with all the blanks removed. There's also a select option that you could do. But I'm going to remove, or I'm going to change Addison's name here to have her middle initial in it. Right, so now the name has changed a little bit. So I'm going to VLOOKUP again. I'm going to look up this name on, I think it was this sheet. And I'm going to select the set that I want. There's a faster way to do this, but I didn't think about it until I started doing it. So there you get me. I'm going to hit F4 to lock that set in. I want 3 columns over, so 1, 2, 3. I want that value, and if it's not doesn't match that value, then don't give me anything. It's going to bring it up, and as you can see now, Addison has an NA. So if you're working with data and you're like, that's actually accurate, I know she didn't have anything for whatever I'm looking up, but you don't want to see the NA because it's ugly. I always do the basic equation that I want it to look up, so I get an idea of how bad that is. If it's 1, then I'll just manually change it. But if it's a whole bunch, then I go in and I'm going to add a if NA equation. So this is saying if an NA comes up, when you do this equation, then, because a comma means then in Excel, you're going to give me a blank. So I'm just going to put nothing in there. You could type 0 if you wanted to. You can type no, anything you want. And then you close it off. And that just says, if you can't find what you're looking for when you do this, then type the word no and hit enter. I'm going to copy this all the way down. And now you see that it's changed to that. So you can make it nice and pretty. And then this is how I merge a whole bunch of data into one summary. And it makes it a little bit easier for me to start seeing things, because then I can start developing stories together, right? And I can say, well, this is salary. And then I could put benefits here, right? Do another table that has the benefits only. And then I can do an average. I mean, I could do this math here, but this is another way. So the pivot tables are live. And then if you go into your data set and you add more data, right? Like this was, sorry, this is why I relabel things, everything as I'm going along. If you right click, you can rename these. I always name them as I go because I get lost, and I could have 25 of these. And this is how I do things. Like you're seeing behind the veil now, guys, a little bit. If I wanted to, I added new data and I was like, okay, well, now I need to refresh it. What happens is this data set is locked in at 8,612 lines. So I could go to activate the pivot table I want to refresh, click analyze, click change source data. It will tell me where it's at, and I can just reselect all of the data, click enter, and it will refresh. The other option is to take this data set and insert it into a table. And right now the data set's at 8,612, and you click OK. And now you can see the formatting's changed a little bit. So now this is a table. So if I go to add a line down here, oops. My goodness. And, you know, I just randomly make up things. You can see now that as data gets added, my table expands. And if I change my pivot table now to, this is called table 1, but if I select the whole table, it'll tell me that's table 1. Now, anytime I update that table and I refresh my pivot table by hitting refresh, it will automatically do it. I don't have to change the data set. I don't have to relink it. It's going to automatically do it with the table. That's one of those things that I forget to do, and then I miss data. Deb.
My question to you, Cherie, is I didn't realize about the table, so I've just added rows, or I've tried to insert rows in the middle, and then I make sure that my range, the data source captures everything. But then it usually adds, like if this were, I'm adding, I don't know, someone who's not on the table, it inserts them at the bottom of my pivot table rather than alphabetizing them. So is there a way to make sure that they remain alphabetized?
Yeah, you just go up to your pivot table and reset it. So let's put someone in here so I can demonstrate what you're talking about. I'm just going to write over this. I'll go to my pivot table and refresh it. And I mean, I could have done a smaller data set, but that's no fair. So now you see Gretchen's down at the bottom, which is what you're saying.
Yeah.
So if you go to the top and you click A to Z, it should put Gretchen in the middle here.
You've got to be kidding me. Thank you.
Yep. I mean, it's those little things that make or break all of us. So the data set makes it, this is why I use the table. Actually, Christine Morgando showed me that trick on using the table.
Okay.
There's one other thing that people tend to get hung up on when they use pivot tables, which is, let's say I want to smash these two together. It's average and total. That makes no sense. In no world would I ever want to do that. And most of the time when you do this for the first time, it's your get pivot is what I call it. Your get pivot is on. This little check mark is next to get pivot table. So when you go to say equals this, I get this big old long thing. And so then people are like, okay, well, equals D or C5 plus, and then you end up typing it. If you want to get rid of that, where you can now select pivot table data without having the big long get pivot, that's the button. It's under options, generate get pivot table, and you uncheck it. And now when I go to select in that, it just gives me the cell. The only reason you would use the get pivot, the only reason I find that I use the get pivot is if you are connecting things together and I want this grand total somewhere else, and I keep refreshing data, right? So now the ground total is not in row 402, but it's in 415. I'd have to retype it on my summary page. If I do the get pivot, it will continue to link to the grand total. It knows I need the grand total of this table. I need the summary, or if I had these subtotals on the subtotal for Zara. So the get pivot is nice if you're linking your pivot table to another field. So you don't have to refresh it and you know your stuff's always right. But turning on and off that get pivot table, like, I don't know how many times I had to do this before I memorized it. That makes the world of difference. Okay. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I needed to look at. I think those were kind of the main things that I wanted to push. Those are the things that I'm using on a regular basis as an analyst, as I'm looking at payroll and I'm pushing financial data with payroll data, or Sarah, when I'd work with your unit and do HR stuff and try and make sure who's on this list, but not on this list. These are the tips and tricks that I use to do that. Is there anything else that someone was hoping I would touch on that you would like to know more about, or any general questions that you're hoping for? Or anything that I missed in the chat, because I was trying to keep an eye on it, but it's kind of hard. Like, I wasn't sure what everyone would need to see. So I have worked in Excel. I have been told, I'm going to take the stop sharing because you don't need to see all my messy data here. I have been told that Excel can make you coffee if you just know what equations to put in there, and they are not wrong. I have learned how to add buttons and radials and drop downs and all of these things simply because I had to learn it quickly. Google is your best friend. You know that Excel can do a drop down menu because you've seen it happen before. So if you Google drop down menu Excel, it'll teach you how to do it. There's also a fantastic training on LinkedIn Learning. That's Excel Basics 2016, I think that's what it's called. It's about 3 hours, so you have to take it in chunks. But it is really good. And I learned a couple of things in that, and it's a reference that I use now. I mean, I search for things all the time. I know Brianna asked if there'll be more classes such as this. I know that Sarah is working diligently to create more lunch and learns. I don't know if they're Excel specific, but I'm sure she will take copious notes on what y'all want to see. I am always available. Zoom is my preferred method of communication, but I am on Teams and you can always email me. I prefer if you didn't call me, just because it's very startling when my phone rings nowadays. But I will answer it if you call me. But if you have any questions, or you're stuck on something, or you're working on a project and you're like, there's got to be a way I can do this faster and more efficient, then ping me. And if I don't know, we can figure it out together. If you need just a guidance on like, here's the word you need to type into Google Teach, like I can be your secondary brain. We learn better together. And most of what I know is because other people have shared it with me. So I have collaborated for years and years and years only to get to this point. And we always learn something. To Deb's point, she says she learned 3 things today. So total success in your lunch, 45 minutes. Christine, you're way too sweet and asking me to host things. I am a jack of all trades, but a master of absolutely nothing. So please feel free to reach out. It doesn't matter what unit you come from. Please write down my name and let me know, especially Excel things or just general questions about work. I mean, you can ask me general questions about anything and I'm happy to give you my 2 cents. But we
It
have
can get real dangerous real fast, everybody.
it will get real dangerous real fast. Nicole, I'm glad I'm not the only one who finds it super, like I'm sitting here in my quiet space and then the thing rings and I go, makes me jump. I'm glad it's not just me. All right, so I did want to try and keep this down so you didn't have to cram in for your entire lunch hour. If you guys